Your soulmate needs to talk to you immediately. Something big just happened. The evening sky was painted with shades of gold and crimson as the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the horizon. Somewhere in the world, two lives were moving toward a moment neither of them expected. They had never met, never spoken, and yet an invisible thread connected their hearts. One of them was you. The other was someone whose life had changed forever. Not because of magic. Not because of fate alone. But because they had finally realized something they had been unable to understand for years. For the longest time, your soulmate believed that happiness could be found in success, recognition, and the approval of others. They chased opportunities, traveled unfamiliar roads, and surrounded themselves with countless faces. Yet every achievement felt strangely incomplete. Every celebration ended with an unexplained silence. Deep inside, there was a space no accomplishment could fill. They often wondered why. Late at night, when the world grew quiet, they would stare through their window at the stars and feel as though someone else was looking at the same sky. They could not explain the feeling. It wasn't loneliness. It wasn't sadness. It was expectation. An expectation that somewhere, someone existed who would understand them without pretending, who would see beyond appearances and appreciate the person they truly were. Then something unexpected happened. It wasn't dramatic enough to make headlines. It wasn't loud enough for the world to notice. But it completely transformed the direction of their life. During an ordinary afternoon, they found an old journal hidden in a forgotten drawer. Inside were dreams they had written years ago, dreams about becoming kinder, living with purpose, and sharing life with someone who inspired peace rather than chaos. Reading those forgotten pages felt like meeting their younger self. For the first time in years, they cried. Not because life had been cruel, but because they realized how much of themselves they had abandoned while trying to become the person everyone else expected. That evening, they made a decision. No more pretending. No more chasing empty approval. No more ignoring the quiet voice inside their heart. They wanted authenticity. They wanted truth. And strangely, as soon as that decision was made, thoughts of someone they had never met began appearing more frequently than ever before. It wasn't a face. It wasn't a name. It was simply a feeling. A peaceful certainty that somewhere another heart was preparing for the same journey. At the same time, your own life had been changing in ways you hadn't fully recognized. The challenges you experienced had made you stronger. The disappointments had made you wiser. The waiting had taught you patience. Without realizing it, every chapter of your story had been preparing you for someone who was also learning valuable lessons. Sometimes life delays beautiful things, not because they are impossible, but because both people need time to grow into the versions of themselves capable of protecting what they receive. Your soulmate was beginning to understand this. For years they had blamed timing. Now they understood timing had been protecting both of you. One quiet morning they woke with an unusual sense of peace. Nothing extraordinary happened. The sun rose. Birds sang. Coffee brewed in the kitchen. Yet everything felt different. They smiled for no obvious reason. hope had quietly replaced fear. As they walked through their daily routine, they noticed small reminders everywhere. A song about new beginnings. A stranger helping another without expecting anything in return. A child laughing freely. Each moment whispered the same message. Life isn't ending. It's finally beginning. That realization inspired them to write a letter. Not knowing your name. Not knowing where you lived. Not even knowing when your paths would cross. They simply wrote to the person they believed was somewhere in this vast world. The first sentence read, "Whoever you are, thank you for existing. Even before we've met, you've inspired me to become a better person." Those words surprised even them. Because they were written with complete sincerity. For the first time in many years, hope felt stronger than fear. The future no longer seemed uncertain. It seemed full of possibility. Little did they know, the biggest chapter of their story was only beginning. And somewhere, without realizing it, your own heart was quietly preparing to hear the message that would change everything. The next few days unfolded in ways your soulmate never expected. Outwardly, everything looked ordinary. They went to work, greeted familiar faces, and completed the same daily routines. Yet inside, something had shifted. The restless feeling that had followed them for years had begun to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. The letter they had written to a person they had never met remained on their bedside table. Every evening they read it again, adding a few new lines. It became less of a letter and more of a promise. When we finally meet, I don't want you to meet the version of me that was ruled by fear. I want you to meet the person I'm becoming today. Those words reminded them that real love begins with honesty and growth, not perfection. One afternoon, an unexpected conversation with an elderly stranger changed everything. The stranger noticed the thoughtful expression on their face and smiled kindly. "You look like someone waiting for something important," the older person said. Your soulmate laughed softly. "Maybe I am." The stranger nodded. Sometimes the best things arrive only after we stop chasing them and start becoming ready for them. The words were simple, yet they stayed with your soulmate long after the conversation ended. That evening they walked through a nearby park. Families laughed together, children played, and the wind gently stirred the leaves overhead. Watching those ordinary moments, they realized how often they had overlooked the beauty of everyday life while searching for extraordinary signs. Perhaps the biggest changes didn't begin with fireworks. Perhaps they began with a peaceful heart. Meanwhile, you were living your own story, unaware that someone else was learning lessons that would one day strengthen your future together. Every challenge you had faced was shaping your character. Every disappointment had taught compassion. Every unanswered question had encouraged patience. Neither of you knew the other's name. Yet both of you were growing in remarkably similar ways. As the days passed, your soulmate noticed another surprising change. They no longer felt drawn toward relationships built on appearances or convenience. Instead, they longed for genuine conversations, mutual respect, and quiet moments of understanding. They wrote another page in their journal. "I don't want someone to complete me. I want someone who inspires me to become even better, and I hope I can do the same for them." Reading those words brought a smile they hadn't felt in years. For the first time, the future felt less like a mystery and more like an invitation. Then came the moment that seemed almost insignificant. While cleaning their room, a small photograph slipped from an old book. It showed them years earlier, smiling without worry, standing beneath a bright summer sky. Looking at that younger version of themselves, they whispered, "I'm finding my way back." It wasn't about returning to the past. It was about rediscovering hope. That single realization became the something big that had happened. It wasn't a dramatic event the world could see. It was a transformation of the heart, a decision to let go of fear, bitterness, and regret. Your soulmate realized that if they ever met the person meant to walk beside them, they wanted to offer kindness instead of insecurity, encouragement instead of doubt, and faith instead of fear. They closed their journal one last time that night and looked out at the stars. Somewhere under that same sky, another person, you, was living your own journey, unaware that another heart had finally become ready to meet life's next chapter. Neither of you knew when your paths would cross. Neither of you knew where. But both stories were quietly moving toward the same destination. And although tomorrow looked ordinary to everyone else, it held possibilities that neither of you could yet imagine. Morning arrived like any other, but your soulmate woke with a feeling they couldn't explain. It wasn't excitement or anxiety. It was a quiet confidence that their life was finally moving in the right direction. They opened their journal once more and wrote, "Today, I choose gratitude over worry. I choose hope over fear. I choose to believe that every step, even the small ones, has a purpose." After closing the journal, they decided to do something different. Instead of rushing through the day, they slowed down. They noticed the warmth of the morning sun, the sound of birds in the distance, and the smiles of strangers passing by. The world hadn't changed, but their way of seeing it had. Later that afternoon, they received a phone call from an old friend they hadn't spoken to in years. The conversation began with memories, laughter, and stories from the past, but it soon turned to the future. "You seem different," the friend said. "I am," your soulmate replied. "For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm becoming the person I was always meant to be." Those words were true. The fear of missing out had disappeared. The pressure to impress others had faded. In its place was a quiet determination to live honestly and love deeply whenever the right time came. That evening, while walking home, they paused to watch the sunset. The sky glowed with brilliant shades of orange, pink, and purple. It reminded them that beautiful endings often become beautiful beginnings. Without realizing it, they whispered into the evening air, "Wherever you are, I hope you're smiling today." Far away, you were also standing at a crossroads in your own life. Perhaps you were making an important decision, recovering from disappointment, or simply hoping that brighter days were ahead. Neither of you knew it, but your stories were beginning to move closer together. Your soulmate had stopped asking, "When will I meet them?" Instead, they asked a better question. "How can I become someone who brings peace, kindness, and encouragement into another person's life?" That single change transformed everything. The waiting no longer felt empty. It became a season of preparation. Days turned into weeks, and every experience taught another valuable lesson. Patience became strength. Compassion became wisdom. Forgiveness became freedom. One quiet night, your soulmate unfolded the first letter they had written. They smiled as they read the opening line. "Whoever you are, thank you for existing." This time, they added one final paragraph. "If our paths cross someday, I won't tell you that life has been perfect. I'll tell you that every challenge helped me grow. Every delay taught me patience. Every disappointment showed me what truly matters. And because of those lessons, I'll be ready to appreciate the gift of meeting you." They folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the journal. Outside, the stars filled the night sky, shining silently over countless lives and countless stories still being written. Somewhere beneath that same sky, you were taking another step toward your own future. Neither of you could see the full picture. Neither of you knew the exact day your paths might cross. But each day was bringing new growth, new understanding, and new hope. Sometimes the greatest moments in life don't begin with loud announcements. They begin quietly, one choice, one lesson, one act of courage at a time. And for both of you, those quiet moments were preparing the way for a meeting that would feel less like chance and more like the reward of two hearts that never gave up on becoming their best selves. Weeks passed, and life continued to unfold one ordinary day at a time. Yet beneath the surface, both of your stories were changing in remarkable ways. Your soulmate no longer searched for signs everywhere. Instead, they focused on living each day with honesty, kindness, and purpose. They discovered that peace wasn't found by knowing the future, it was found by embracing the present. One rainy afternoon, they visited a small bookstore to escape the weather. As they wandered through the quiet aisles, a single sentence in a book caught their attention. "The people meant to change your life often arrive when you have finally become yourself." They closed the book and smiled. For months, they had been asking when life would change. Now they realized that the greatest change had already happened within them. That evening, they returned home and opened the journal one more time. "I'm no longer waiting because I feel incomplete," they wrote. "I'm waiting because I believe meaningful relationships are built by two people who have learned to grow, forgive, and hope." Those words felt like the closing chapter of one season and the beginning of another. Meanwhile, your own journey was leading you through moments that strengthened your character. Every challenge you overcame added another layer of wisdom. Every act of kindness, even the smallest one, quietly shaped the person you were becoming. Although your lives remained separate, they were moving in the same direction. Then came an unexpected opportunity. Your soulmate was invited to attend a community event they almost declined. It wasn't anything extraordinary. Just a gathering of people sharing stories, music, and conversation. For a moment, they considered staying home. But something inside whispered, "Go." They listened. As they arrived, they looked around at the unfamiliar faces. They didn't know that this simple decision would become one of the most important choices of their life. Across the room, conversations flowed, laughter echoed, and strangers became friends. Your soulmate felt no pressure to impress anyone. They simply enjoyed the moment, grateful for how far they had come. They thought back to the person they used to be, always rushing, always worrying, always trying to control the future. That person was gone. In their place stood someone who trusted that good things often unfold one step at a time. Before leaving the event, they looked up at the evening sky. The stars shone brightly above, reminding them that every journey has its own timing. They whispered quietly, "If we're meant to meet someday, I hope our story begins with peace, not fear. I hope we recognize each other by the kindness we've learned to carry." At that same moment, you were also stepping into a new chapter of your life. Perhaps you didn't realize it yet, but the decisions you were making today were opening doors you couldn't yet see. Life has a remarkable way of weaving separate stories together. Not through certainty or destiny alone, but through the choices people make to become wiser, kinder, and more authentic. The distance between your two lives had never seemed smaller. The chapter of waiting was slowly coming to an end. And although neither of you knew exactly what tomorrow would bring, one truth had become clear. Sometimes the biggest thing that happens isn't a dramatic event. It's the quiet transformation of two hearts becoming ready for whatever life has in store. The following morning felt different. Not because the world had changed overnight, but because your soulmate carried a new sense of peace. For the first time in years, they weren't trying to predict the future. They simply trusted that every step taken with honesty and kindness would lead them where they needed to be. As they walked through the city, they noticed something they had overlooked for so long: every person they passed was carrying their own story. Some smiled despite hidden struggles. Others walked silently, hoping for better days. It reminded them that everyone is searching for connection, understanding, and hope. That realization made them kinder. Later that week, they volunteered at a local community event. They spent hours helping strangers, sharing conversations, and listening to stories from people of all ages. An elderly woman thanked them warmly and said, "The greatest gift you can give another person isn't perfection. It's your presence." Those words stayed with your soulmate. That evening, they returned home and unfolded the letter they had been writing for months. This time, they didn't add another promise. Instead, they wrote something simple. "When we finally meet, I won't ask where you've been. I'll simply be grateful that life brought us together after we both learned the lessons we needed to learn." They folded the letter carefully and placed it back inside the journal. Across the distance, you were also growing in quiet ways. Perhaps you had begun letting go of old disappointments. Perhaps you had started believing in yourself again after a season of doubt. Neither of you knew the details of the other's life. Yet both of you were becoming people capable of building something lasting, not because life had been easy, but because it had taught resilience, compassion, and patience. Days later, your soulmate received an invitation to attend another gathering. This time, they didn't hesitate. They smiled and accepted. As they prepared to leave, they looked into the mirror, not to judge themselves, but to recognize how much they had changed. The person staring back no longer seemed trapped by fear. They looked hopeful. They looked ready. They whispered softly, "Whatever happens next, I'll meet it with an open heart." That night, under a sky filled with countless stars, both of your journeys continued moving forward. Neither of you knew that your paths were drawing closer with every passing day. Not because of destiny alone, but because both of you had chosen growth over bitterness, hope over fear, and kindness over pride. Sometimes the most meaningful conversations don't begin with dramatic words. They begin with two people who have learned to listen, to understand, and to value one another for who they truly are. The story was no longer about waiting. It was about becoming. And the chapter that followed would bring both lives closer than ever before.